similar.
Yes.
So, you know.
We're all better off for that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's, we got a few minutes, so let me just shift gears really quickly. I would want to talk about autonomy really quickly. So, and I know this is something you think about, but how far are we away from true autonomy in vehicles, do you think?
Well, there are autonomous vehicles driving around in Phoenix right now. Yes, exactly. So, like, if you say in a pure, like, how far away? Well, today,
right?
Yesterday, last week, last month.
Let's say at blitz scale.
Yes. Well, I think the key thing there is actually how do you get it so that you begin to say we have scale manufacturing and a ton of them, and we have the right trade-off between safety and efficiency. My guess would probably be somewhere around 10 to 20 years, and there's a big range there.
Are you factoring in redesigning cities around vehicles?
Some. And by the way, I think it'll be unevenly adopted through cities. I think one of the things that would be smart for city planners is to say, look, we want this. It'll reconfigure space, reconfigure parking lots, reconfigure efficiency. So we want to make ourselves amenable to this. And this is something we want to attract people doing here and reconfiguring for. But some cities will obviously go, okay, well, we have more space, we're more naturally configurable, we can more naturally do the, take some of the risks on the development side of it, and so we may be the first adopters to it. That's part of, I think, what's going on in Phoenix. But I think it's going to be, I think at scale, there's some vehicles you might see even 5 to 7 years, but I think it's really 10 to 20.
Yeah. I mean, there's also some argument that the real answer, whatever, to the problem, especially in dense urban environments, is autonomous public transportation coupled with some sort of last mile, like scooters or something like that. Which certainly would be a different roll of the dice than let's reconfigure cities around the same amount of cars, but just all drive themselves.
Yes, and I think that's broadly would be a smart space design, which you say, look, all these very big vehicles, most of them tend to park at the edges, and then the smaller vehicles go around that. Now, part of what you need to do then there is still a major reconfiguration, because you'd want to be very careful about which cars you had on the inside, what the safety coefficient would be,
right?
Because cars and scooters, that's potentially, human danger hazardous.
Of course, yeah. Cool. Well, look, I wish I had a lot more time, but the book's excellent. You should all check it out if you have any interest in companies getting larger responsibly as well, which is a huge concern of mine. So thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. When we come back, which is going to be at 1 p.m., we are going to sit down with Facebook's former Chief Security Officer, Alex Stamos. Lots to unpack there. So I'll see you guys all back at 1. You're already leaving. It's great. Just step ahead here in Silicon Valley.
Space is not a destination. It's not a tourist attraction or a delivery route. And we know it's not a race, because last we looked, there is no finish line. Despite what others may say, space is not a place to go. Space is a place to do. A place to do big things, important things, useful things, epic things. Things that help militaries protect better. Things that help humans communicate better. Things that teach us about other worlds. And about how we can better protect the one we live in now. There's an asteroid up there that may reveal the secrets of the universe if we can bring home a piece of it. Let's do that. We won't need to launch satellites anymore if we can 3D print them up there. Let's do that. There are terabytes of data that must be turned into vital information. Let's do that too. Let's solve the world's biggest problems. Let's invite the bold and the brilliant to join us. Let's unleash the best engineers on and off Earth. Because doing is what we do.
When creating a winning app, it all comes down to building great user experiences. No matter building mobility services into your app will take the experience to a whole new level, enriching user engagement and increasing customer loyalty. But in today's world, with so many transportation options, delivering a door-to-door solution to your users without leaving your app is a big task. Introducing the Here Mobility SDK, a seamless, fully integrated SDK connecting your app to all transportation services available while remaining within your user experience. The Mobility SDK integrates access to the Here Mobility Marketplace, a global one-stop shop for aggregating mobility services, providing all transports in real time, making it easy for developers and technologists to bring mobility into any app. With the Here Mobility SDK, users will be able to get any transportation service such as taxis, shuttles, buses, trains, bike sharing, you name it. Put mobility into your users' hands. Let them explore, plan, and book their ride without needing to leave your app. Here Mobility, connecting the mobility world.
Four years ago, we were traveling in Colombia, Evan and I. We ran out of battery. We were stranded in the middle of Bogota. It was late at night. Evan geniusly MacGyvered together a prototype of this product on the spot, and we were able to take charge from 2 AA batteries and put it into our phone. We wanted to make a product that could live on your keychain and give you options when you're in these tight situations. Sidekick is very much about letting you make that emergency call rather than watch that long YouTube video.
So the first feature of Sidekick is the internal battery. So if we take the cable out and then plug this into your phone, and so you can see there we've started charging. So this is good for about 2 hours talk time. So the second feature of Sidekick, and this is probably the biggest differentiator, is that you can use Sidekick with D batteries that you can pick up at a convenience store if you're really stuck. And then we complete the circuit using a magnetic bridge cover. And then we plug that into your phone. And there we go, you're up. The other feature of Sidekick is it also functions as a cable. So if you're at your friend's house and say they're an iPhone user, an Android user, or vice versa, you've always got a cable on you. So let's try this oscilloscope that we've set up here. And there you go, you can see we're charging from the oscilloscope. And if you're in a real emergency, and I mean real emergency, Sidekick also has a bottle opener. Cheers.
And because this is an everyday carry that you can have on you all the time, we wanted to bundle in other useful features that could help you out in different situations. So we've bundled in up to 128 gigabyte of storage, which you can use as a thumb drive, or you can plug into your phone and back up photos, videos, if you need it. But the journey for Flintu doesn't stop here. We've got a range of other products that can help fulfill your charge cycle.
RagTag takes the hassle out of lost property for parents. Basically, the way that it works is smart tags come attached to your uniforms at school, and it means that whenever anything goes in lost property, mum or dad simply receive a text message that lets them know where the item is and that they can come and pick it up. We started beginning of 2016. We launched our product in about May, brought on 5 early adopter schools, which were absolutely fantastic. They gave us a huge amount of feedback at the start. And since then, we've raised 600K in a seed round, and we've hired a number of staff which have helped us expand to over 100 schools in Australia. We've partnered with a massive uniform wholesaler and distributor in Australia. They're managing all of our distribution for us, and in return they're paying us a fee for all of the tags and the service that we're providing. And they're actually using our product as a unique selling proposition, which is putting them way beyond all of the other players in the market.
The UK is the next market, and other markets with school uniforms where RagTag is heading next. But we think there's a huge untapped market for dependent lost property technology, because let's face it, they're the areas of society that lose their stuff the most and have the most trouble finding it. We do require a sensor at the lost property area. It's an RFID, UHF RFID sensor that's on the wall. For institutions like schools and aged care, it's really important to make it affordable. So in fact, when we rolled out in Australia and in the UK and other territories, that sensor is free for the school. Because parents across society, a whole bunch of different socioeconomic levels, that tag needed to be affordable for all of them. So that's our challenge, is to make sure it's affordable enough for every family so that we do become a household name.
Snapchat is back with version 2 of Spectacles, its sunglasses camera. This time around, they're water resistant, they take photos as well as videos, and the case is a lot smaller, so you're more likely to bring them around with you. Snapchat only sold about 220,000 pairs of its old Spectacles because they were just kind of hard to have around. But even though they're still in a yellow, bright case, the case is a lot smaller. It's more like purse fitting. It doesn't quite fit in your pocket, but it's definitely easier to bring around. The case also charges the glasses 4 times. What you'll notice when you put on the glasses is that the little bump in the back where all of the hardware is housed is a lot smaller, making the glasses feel lighter and more natural. When you put them on, they're actually quite comfortable, and with the little touch of the button on this left side, you'll see that the white ring of lights comes on, signaling that you're recording. If you tap and hold, you can actually take a photo now instead of just a video when you tap once. Spectacles will now come in a much more natural set of colors, a deeper blue, a deeper red, and black, instead of those crazy teal pastel colors like last time. And that means you're a lot more likely to actually want to put them on your face. Snapchat has put a lot of work into fixing the pairing process that was really clumsy before. Instead of a QR code, now you just press and hold down on the button while in the pairing mode in your Snapchat app, and they instantly pair together. Now all you do is hit the import button, and it'll download all of your snaps off of your Spectacles over Wi-Fi. You can see here that the quality is pretty high and the downloads are happening very quickly, about 4 times quicker than the time it took to download HD from Spectacles version 1. Here you can see me riding a scooter along the pier in San Francisco. And Spectacles still shoot in that circular format, so no matter which way you turn your phone, it's always full screen. Spectacles claim that they can last almost a week with regular usage, and you won't have to download all of your snaps to your phone until after. And that makes it nice because you can leave your phone at home and just travel around with your specs. That's great if you're going to the beach or somewhere wet where you might not want to get your phone wet, but the Spectacles can actually take video and photos underwater. You don't want to dive to 200 meters like a diving watch allows, but going a few feet under the water is no problem. Because Spectacles don't have that yellow ring right here, it's a lot harder to tell that they are actually cameras. Nobody when I was riding around seemed to notice that I actually was recording video of them. And that could be a problem for Snapchat. It managed to avoid most of the creepy privacy issues that plagued Google Glass in its first few years because people always knew that you were wearing camera glasses. There's nothing super revolutionary about version 2 of Spectacles, but they improve on so many of the pain points from V1 that I do expect them to sell better, people to record more content because they actually keep them with them, and for them to help Snapchat, maybe not just in the business side, but actually to get more interesting content onto the app that you're not going to see on places like Instagram. Spectacles version 2 go on sale on April 26th in the US, UK, Canada, and France, and will be available in 12 more countries in a week or so. They're $150, and they're only available through Snapchat's website and app. No more of those Snapbot vending machines for now. But luckily, even if you just have V1, Snapchat is going to push a firmware update so that everybody can take photos with their Spectacles, not just V2 users. As long as the company doesn't endure a bunch of privacy scandals because people don't realize that they're a camera since they removed that yellow ring, I think these could be a big leap forward for Snapchat's hardware efforts.
Earlier this year, Apple released the iMac Pro, a thoughtfully built machine aimed at creative professionals. They sent us a mid-tier 10-core model to test out video editing. As video producers at TechCrunch, we don't always have the luxury of 2-week deadlines. Edits are often banged out right after the shoot. To be honest, listing off the latest specs won't impress us. What we need to know is, Can we simultaneously run Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, and have 20 Chrome windows open without bogging down the machine? Will rendering complete before I can run down to Farolito and grab a burrito? My name is Tito. In other words, can the price of upgrading be justified? The machine's design is clean and minimal. Basically, what you'd expect from Apple. The Magic Keyboard feels like every Apple keyboard from the past few years, except that it's space gray with black keys. Fancy. It's decent, solid, there's really nothing else to say. The Magic Mouse 2 handles well on a variety of surfaces, and the built-in gesture make it easy to switch back and forth from a laptop trackpad, but depending on your workflow, you might want the $50 upgrade for a Magic Trackpad 2. The Lightning charging port for the Magic Mouse 2 is at the bottom. You can't use it while recharging the battery. It's a little annoying, but not a big deal. The keyboard and mouse lasts about 2 weeks of heavy use before it needs to be charged. The FaceTime camera has been upgraded to 1080p, which means you'll look great on everyone else's devices, but what you see depends on their camera quality. And if I'm FaceTiming you with my shitty 2014 MacBook Pro, it's not gonna look too good, but man, do I look good in real life, but not really. The audio quality was surprisingly good, which is a plus for video bloggers. On the back, there's a 3.5mm headphone jack, SD card slot, 4 USB 3, 4 Thunderbolt 3, and an Ethernet port. We found use for all the ports except for the Thunderbolt 3. I have a Drobo plugged into one of the Thunderbolt 3 ports, but can't find a use for the other 3 since most USB-C devices have a USB 3 connection on the other end. We're going to assume the 4 ports is Apple's preparation for when Thunderbolt 3 replaces USB 3 as the standard, since they're all about that future-proofing. Editing in Premiere Pro was ridiculously fluid. There was no latency when switching between the Ripple, Razor, and Pen tools. Exporting a sequence while editing a gallery of CR2 files in Lightroom and jumping from one program to the next didn't slow down the system. The loudest the internal fan spins during heavy-duty processing was a faint hum. We ran some tests between the iMac Pro and the 2014 MacBook Pro, which most of us are working on, and it's super duper fast. Yeah, fast as fuck. Performance-wise, we have no major gripes. In fact, the 10-core configuration Apple sent us outstrips our needs for basic 1080p video editing. It's better suited for heavy-duty motion graphics, 3D modeling, and feature-length films shot on 4K. The $5,000 base model would have probably been more than sufficient, and the highest configuration at $13,000 would have been overkill. But at this price point, who is the iMac Pro really for? As sweet as this machine is, there is no way I can justify a $10,000 price tag to my corporate overlords. A crapload of our production friends have switched over to PCs because of Apple's lack of configuration capabilities. You can build the same specs for 1/3 the cost. Those running production companies won't spend that much with so many employees. Who is it for then? The iMac Pro is for a niche market within the already niche market of creative professionals, the ones who are willing to spend an extra few thousand for aesthetics. Still, after a month with the Kobe beef of computers, only to revert back to a steamed White Castle patty of a laptop, it's a little sad to have to send it back. Hey everybody, remember to give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and please subscribe. All right, see you next time. This video is not sponsored, so don't tell me it's sponsored. It's not. Okay, bye.
Is there anything you can't ship?
Well, pretty much we use bicycles and motorbikes, so the size, we're limited on size, and obviously anything illegal
So
is
a
not
fridge?
allowed. A fridge, not yet, not yet.
All right, sounds good. What does Glovo do? A lot of people in the States don't actually know.
We pretty much bring anything you want within your city in a question of minutes, around 30 minutes. Our Glovers, those are the couriers, they'll go and buy anything from any store or restaurant and bring it to you through our app.
So I worry that we did this back in 1999. What changed that lets you do this now here in Barcelona, and especially in all the cities that you're in now?
Well, I think the world's mobile now, and that's the big difference. That you have an app, and everybody has one, a mobile phone, and literally you can order anything you want.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about the team and some of the cities that you're attacking right now?
Global's headquarters in Barcelona. We have local teams in each of the countries that we've launched in. So we'll have satellite offices in Paris, Milan, in Portugal, and now in Latin America. In terms of software development, we do all of it in-house. So we bring in the best engineers and designers from around the world, really, to work on this product.
So what's the hardest thing about designing for a global audience?
It's really easy to fall into the trap of building out features that are only applicable to one or two markets. One of our core design principles is always build out features that we know we can deliver across multiple markets, of course adjusting them as they go.
It's not a small startup, but is a fairly small startup in a European city. What are you guys worried about in terms of competition?
Well, I mean, I think we've got to be key to, focus on our plan, which is pretty much delivering anything. That's our big differentiator. In Europe, we don't have a major competitor in that space. There's a lot of companies that specialize on food delivery. We also do that. We'll bring, food from the best restaurants in the city, but we also bring from any store or pick up anything. So as long as we're focused on that and executing well, we'll have the early mover advantage. So I think we're pretty confident that we're doing things well.
Okay. Do you guys ever go to stores anymore, or are you just Glovo everything?
I Glovo everything, essentially.
Don't you miss going to a restaurant?
Babbel is the top-grossing language learning app in all app stores worldwide. You can learn basically anywhere, anytime.
Online language learning.
Digital language learning. We don't divide it so much.
Mobile,
I think
everything.
language learning is language learning, and we happen to be started in the digital space. So we started out with a web version that was back in 2007. So had quite a lot of technology shifts from Flash to HTML to mobile. So we went through quite a lot of different changes.
And so that means that you're just coming up on your 10th anniversary now.
Absolutely, we had a fantastic party to celebrate the 10 years anniversary. When we started, we always wanted to build a product for everyone. My mom, myself, anyone who would be at least interested in language learning in the first place.
How does your platform differ from the other ones that are out there, or what has been available?
We're using all the research that's been out there in the language learning field since a couple of 100 years, and we figured out how to put that into an online digital mobile experience with a focus on communicative settings. So our first lessons always are around like introducing yourself, saying hi, saying bye, ordering something at the restaurant. I think it's very practical, and that's probably the difference to many other solutions out there that have a rather structural approach. We're always focused on language that you can actually use in your real life.
And now you're expanding to the US. That's been a big focus this year. How does the US differ?
One of the ways the US obviously is different, no one needs to learn Spanish for their job. So like a biggest driver that we see all over Europe is to improve your English for your career. That's basically non-existent in the US. But US is our second biggest country overall within Babbel, and it's growing north of 100% this year alone. So pretty good.
What's up, Tech Crunchers? We are at Skydio HQ, where we're going to chat with a group of startup employees who are building autonomous drones that can track your every move. We're going to chat with their CEO and see what they're up to. Let's check them out.
The basic idea for what we're doing is we think fully autonomous drones are really the future of the industry. And we've believed that from the beginning, and we've also believed that the core technology and the core enabler there is the software system. So we've really been focused on building that from the very beginning.
So I'm seeing kind of a lot of prototypes behind us. You want to just kind of give a long overview, kind of stretching through the process of where this idea started, translating into your new product, the R1.
For almost the first year of the company, it was just my 3 co-founders working in a basement, self-funded. So the prototyping at that stage was very, very scrappy. So we started with just off-the-shelf quadcopter frames and putting media center computers and USB cameras on them, and essentially starting the core of our software system. And there's been a pretty steady evolution since then to get to the R1. So we built more sophisticated rigs that let us have multiple cameras to develop more and more of the software. And then at a certain point, when we had kind of answered enough of the questions there about what was going to be possible, what we really wanted the product to be, we started developing the custom hardware platform. And you know, the basic idea there has been pretty constant from the beginning, but we've been through a number of iterations to get everything dialed in just the way that we want for R1. Yeah, so we started like this first prototype, AirCam 1, aptly named, was using basically like a media center computer, which was not very power efficient, not at all designed for this. The cameras are plugged in over USB, so there was a lot that was like not great about this, but it allowed us to get something in the air and start developing the software system. And then, you know, I think we're just fortunate to kind of be doing this at the right time. So like after we started the company, NVIDIA announced the TX1, these sort of like perfect embedded compute modules that have really powerful GPUs, and that's what we started using. So we did the sort of off-the-shelf computer thing for a little while, and then started working on NVIDIA dev boards.
What's up with this monster? How's
Yes,
this one
this,
doing?
this is a team favorite.
The prettiest of the bunch.
This is the triangle rig, is what we called it.
Okay.
So this is when we had one prototype engineer who was awesome, and he designed this kind of superstructure, but it's still fairly clunky. But this was the first thing we built that had multiple cameras kind of facing in every direction.
Okay.
So this was the first prototype that was basically all our custom hardware. So you can see the form factor is pretty close there.
Sure.
It's not exactly the final thing, but this is pretty close to, you know, all the big ideas were in play, and this is pretty much all our final custom electronics.
Was 6 pairs of cameras pretty much like that was at least what you had to hit for the most part in your mind from the beginning?
Yeah, that was a fairly early design decision. Like we wanted the key thing that we had in mind for basically every product decision is we wanted trustworthy autonomy. We wanted you to be able to trust the device to fly itself without you needing to pay too much attention to it. And we felt that one of the real building blocks to making that happen was having stereo pairs looking in every direction, which has a bunch of other challenges associated with it. Like that's one of the reasons why we developed this this perimeter structure out of composites to hold all the cameras in the configuration that we needed, and be super rigid.
Yeah. Yeah, I was curious about that. Was it a decision from the beginning not to make like the wings fold or anything? Because I know there's some drones that have a similar form factor that fold up.
Yeah, so it's something that we explored, but we thought that this was going to be like a superior product experience. It still fits into your backpack, and it doesn't have the added complexity and weight of folding, which, especially for having the cameras around the outside, just wouldn't really solve.
Cool. So, you know, around the launch, a lot of people were talking about the camera as kind of the self-flying selfie cam, which, you know, for a $2,500 product, like, you know, I think that you can see a lot more potential in, you know, what the one-liner about it could be. So as you kind of look to the future, you know, are you a selfie cam company? Like how do you characterize it?
We probably have like a mixed relationship with the word selfie. I mean, I think that if you just think about cameras in general, like first of all, cameras are just everywhere in our lives, right? Every smartphone has one. Actually, every smartphone has at least 2 now. Some have more. The major use case for phones is taking pictures. Most social media is driven by people taking and sharing pictures and video. So cameras, pictures, video are just like a core part of our existence now, and it's becoming more central. And then if you think about like what are people taking pictures and video of, most pictures and video gets taken of people. Like people are the most interesting subjects.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want, really, but we think of this as just like another sort of evolution of the camera. It's a camera that understands the scene it's looking at and has the ability to move itself. And our first use case is targeted around capturing amazing content of people doing cool stuff that you would otherwise not be able to get. You know, when people take pictures of themselves now, almost by definition, they're not doing anything interesting because they have the ability to like stand there and pose, or their buddy is holding the camera. Whereas this thing allows you to like capture the stuff that you're most excited about without having to think or worry about it. You know, it's hard to say what the category is going to be called in the long term, but we think it's a real thing and it's going to be pretty big. And the kind of like consumer market questions. That's not a drill. That's a prototype. That's a R1 that's strapped down.
The R1 with the Hailfire integration.
A lot of these things sort of look like drone torture chambers where we have the thing like strapped down and then beat it up.
Got to do that testing.
Aira is, it's spelled A-I-R-A, and it is a company that provides access to instant information for people who are visually impaired. So we are using a pair of glasses that is connected to a smartphone, that we have an Aira app on the smartphone. And what you do is you basically put the glasses on your face, and you're able to link up with a network of live human agents that are around the country. And these agents are all trained. They all go through a really strict screening process to go through how to help direct a blind person or a visually impaired person, how to describe things. And every visually impaired person who's an Aira Explorer is what we call them, they have a profile that allows them to kind of illustrate how much description they like. So some people, for example, want a ton of description, really detailed information about colors and designs and everything else. And some people just really want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible and want limited, descriptions. And so whenever the Aira agent picks up that call, what they see on their dashboard on the screen is the video that's coming out of the glasses. They see who the Aira Explorer is, they see their profile and all that information, but they also see things like the Google map that's pinpointing the GPS location of the Aira Explorer. They see things like points of interest that are nearby, and they could even click on those points of interest to get things like menus at a restaurant. So for example, if I was saying, hey, I wanted to go to this restaurant, they could direct me on how to get to that restaurant if I was walking, but they could also on the way read me the menu so that when I got to that restaurant, I'd be able to know exactly what I wanted and what was available to me on that menu.
So Aira launched this past year. What would you say is the most common use case for the users?
There's a lot of people who use it for reading different items. So for example, sorting through mail is a constant frustration.
Sure.
Paper mail for me is like, it's annoying.
Annoying for everybody.
Yeah, seriously.
More so.
But doing a lot of mail filtering, some people use it a little bit more extensively for a lot of reading tasks. There is a lot of navigation. I've always been referred to as the airport guy because I do a lot of travel for my job, and so I absolutely love it in airports, and that's something that we're really we have a huge initiative for because we believe that Aira is something that should be available at every single airport around the country and the world.
Well, it definitely sounds like you're up to some great work. Greg, thanks so much for showing us.
Hey, thanks, Lucas.
About 4 years ago, Fetch started. We kind of came into the market with a big vision, a long-term vision of not only transporting goods with a mobile robot, but eventually doing picking with the robot. And for the last 3 years, we've really focused on the mobile part of it, being able to move pieces, cases, and pallets. That means we have a 100-kilogram robot, a 500-kilogram robot, and a 1,500-kilogram payload robot. And all of this basically creates a suite of options for our customers to pick and choose and mix and match, because we have different modules that go on top, to really provide an end-to-end solution across multiple business units. We built the hardware as a platform so that we could build different accessories on top of it. So we have different modules. We have a RFID module that allows you to find inventory in a facility. And we have one that's just a fixed shelf, and that's used for moving goods around. But we also have newer accessories like putting a conveyor top on top of the robot. We call it a roller top. And then a cart attaching device so you can move carts around in your facility. And then we eventually made 2 large robot platforms, the 500 and the 1500. The robots have their own onboard intelligence, which helps them avoid obstacles and things like that. But all of the cloud robotics software that we've built basically allows us to deploy systems to customers in less than 8 hours and allows them to configure it without knowing anything about robotics. Amazon Prime has really ratcheted up the market, fiercity for getting product to people very fast, and that has a lot of implications on how much labor you need, how fast that labor needs to be able to provide units per hour to ship out. And so there were a lot of market factors that really made manufacturing and warehousing an ideal market for robotics. And like I said, the problem is solvable. It's what roboticists call the semi-structured environment. You kind of know what it looks like, you kind of know what all the factors are, and then the people inside that environment are financially incentivized to behave themselves. So if you have a robot driving around, no one's going to jump out in front of it and say, "Hey robot, did you find me?" or do things like that. And so it's really an ideal area to deploy right now. Manufacturing and warehousing just looked like a really tractable problem from a robotics perspective, but there were a lot of other strong market indicators that drove us towards it, like a labor shortage. I know everyone talks about robots and jobs, but there's a massive labor shortage in warehousing and manufacturing. There's about 600,000 unfilled positions. If you go to any conference today for material handling and logistics, all you're going to hear is, "I can't find enough people to do the jobs." It's the #1 factor that people talk about when it comes to robots and jobs or just labor in general.
This robot is going to water my garden. How?
So it uses technology we've borrowed from agricultural research, and we've combined it with useful automation to help everyday people grow food at home. It's designed to be left outside in the garden and grow for years. So it's solar powered, runs on the same energy as the plants, sun comes up, powers the unit, starts working. So it uses a camera, a thermal sensor, and other visual sensors to look at the garden, to assess if the plants are healthy, if they're water stressed. Then it's able to feed that data to you, but also take action in the garden, automatically water your plants, and also protect it from pests such as deer or possums or even your neighbour's cat.
Or maybe rabbits?
Yes.
What about watering the garden itself? How accurate is it in watering the plants?
So it's reasonably accurate. It looks at the plant's water stress, so it makes sure that a plant actually needs a drink before it gives it, but it also compares it to weather data, makes sure that it's not going to rain tomorrow, so everything's always kept in an optimal level of well watered and growing.
So what sort of data can you get out of it, and are you taking the data and doing something with that?
Absolutely. So we collect a lot of data from the photos and the different measurements that we get from the sensory kit, and then we look at that and we assess what to do in the garden, but we also upload that to a data catalog, and we're able to make every garden space smarter based on what's happening all around the world with other garden space units.
What's next for the Garden Spaces robot?
So Garden Space wants to be the world's biggest food producer without owning a farm. So what's next for us is getting tens of thousands of units out there in people's backyards, have them growing food and producing an enormous amount and benefiting not only themselves, but our environment.
Every time you read about robotic AI threatening the world, there's a picture of a Boston Dynamic atlas. It's more likely that the threat looks more like a laptop than an atlas. We want to break the boundaries of understanding robotics as these sort of sentient autonomous things and think about them in ways that we don't think of humans and animals. Playground is really about understanding robotics in that collaborative, distributed mode and think of their minds not as individual entities, but a collective robot mind that shares sensing and actuation in different physical forms. We tend not to look for short-term returns. In VC, you have to do something which is almost certainly wrong, because otherwise everybody else will do it. So the real opportunities are somewhere between the unlikely and the impossible. We are looking for things that are deep technologies which are durable and defensible, but also achievable. Robotics is really in its infancy for some of these scale applications. What's missing has been the link between what are now tour de force controls and physical systems with the intelligence and perception to make them useful. What makes them investable opportunities and what makes them big companies is blending the intelligence and this new kind of distributed intelligence with these tour de force mechanical devices. Robotics can really change the economics of growing and collecting food. I think that's a very large-scale market. A lot of people will point to autonomous vehicles, which I think will have a large economic impact. We're starting to see robots that can operate in human unstructured environments, things like the agility robotics Cassie that you may have seen. So there'll be, I think, new kinds of industries and new kinds of wealth created by more and more of these capable robots in environments that we simply don't imagine them in today. In order to get the behaviors that make these robots capable of doing things they don't do today, they need to be able to share representations of knowledge and experience in an intimate way. They need to be safe. They need to be able to communicate securely. They need to be able to use state-of-the-art perception and science. And we think all of those things incorporated into a platform will allow our investments to put their capital into the things they're domain experts in and into the applications that we're funding them for. So we think we'll drive these robots into markets to do things we haven't seen. And I think as they become more and more connected to one another, and as they collaborate on what they're learning and what they're thinking about, we'll find more uses for these things above and beyond what are imagined as robotics applications.
I'm Carsten Becker. I'm the head of electronics at PT Scientists, and we're a private company working on the first commercial missions to the moon.
You're creating a lunar lander and a rover.
Yes.
Isn't that expensive? Like, where's the money coming from?
So in the beginning, this was really a lot of private funding and small investors. We caught the interest of Audi. They wanted to support something very innovative and challenge their engineers to think about problems they never have faced before. For example, if every kilogram that we're able to shave off the rover, or any hardware essentially, is worth millions. And so Audi was helping us to reduce the weight from the third generation rover, which was weighing about 45 kilograms, down to 35 kilograms. If you're into math, then you will find out that this translates into 20 million euros of potential payload that we can sell.
And this is all in service of possibly in the future, having more missions, colonies, things like that. This is all interesting science that can be done towards that goal, right?
Yeah, so for example, if you want to build a moon village, as the head of the European Space Agency calls it, you want to know which materials you want to use. One of the most important questions is, can we use duct tape and other materials? How long does the MLI, the blankets, last? And so those are very interesting questions that can be answered from taking a look at what is standing on the moon for 45 years now. We have built a lot of hardware, but it's not like many people imagine that you're working on parts all the time. So you're ordering and then you put it together. But actually, it's a lot of engineering, and 2 or 3 months you put it together and then you qualify it and off you go.
This is another interesting part of the testing, is that obviously if you're making a rover, you have to be able to test it on something that's like lunar regolith, and that's what we have here, the regolith.
Yeah, so what's really cool about this part is it's not just some sand that we stole from a beach. This is what you will find below the first layer of dust.
One of the lightweight innovations you guys have come up with is these amazing tires, if you can really call them that. This is all hardware. It's incredibly light. And so is this like machined aluminum or something like that?
So this is 3D printed aluminum.
Oh, is it sintered?
Yes, exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's really cool stuff because it's extremely sturdy, extremely lightweight. And the best part is it's just one part. It's unlike the wheels we had before, which were a bit smaller. They were made from different parts that had to be screwed together. So you're eliminating points of failure, you're reducing the weight, and yeah, also pretty cool stuff.
In your sort of mission statement, you talk about both making space more accessible and using reusable parts and off-the-shelf parts. How much can really be off the shelf? What do you mean by reusable? And it still sounds like it costs millions of dollars, so how is it more accessible?
We use a lot of components off the shelf, which is something that is not very likely to be seen in other space missions. And the reason why we are getting away with this is because our mission is quite short. Essentially, our mission could be done in as quickly as 2 weeks. And this is why we get away with using automotive parts or industrial-grade components.
They're not meant to last for like 500 miles in 3 years.
Exactly, yes.
How close are you to actually putting together a working lander with rovers built in and everything?
So the goal is to launch at about the third quarter of 2019.
Sparta is a human resilience platform that we started to really reduce injury risk using analytics and hardware, a force plate. And that force plate measures how much force, pressure is put in the ground in different directions. And from that pattern, we've been able to both identify and predict and subsequently reduce injuries, initially in athletes. Then we moved into the military and now moving towards medicine. Most of what we do is dictated by how our feet interact with the ground. So we use a jump. And actually from that jump test, the force in the ground, that pattern, we've been able to standardize through software, and that's what allows us to predict injuries to the upper body. There's a lot of balance tests that are out there, and force plates, you know, the hardware we use have been around for decades. And so it's really the data science that's really allowed us to provide something unique. We're looking for somebody that can make us better and not just, you know, provide us capital. And so Playground's expertise, particularly within hardware, was something that really, you know, appealed to us. And so that was the reason why we started a relationship with Playground.
The company started with 4 graduate students, with Professor Carasoni, that's 5 founders. And we worked on primarily the medical exoskeleton. And he kind of convinced us to stay around to start this company together, and gradually evolved into industrial, and now we have a recreational and a defense exoskeleton. On the medical side, we have a device right now primarily for paraplegics, so allow them to stand up and walk. That's primarily for reducing the risk of secondary injuries. That's very damaging for the body and very costly. We really focus on simplicity right from the beginning and affordability, driving the cost down so more people can have access to these devices. If you have a really good device that costs $100,000, not a lot of people can have access to them. In terms of on the industrial side, we're focusing primarily on back injuries, shoulder injuries, and leg injuries. Let's say for the back X. It's designed to essentially support the weight of the user's upper body and whatever weight he's holding when he's in a stoop position, bending over, picking up an object, transfer that weight through the exoskeleton frame, through the torsionator, and transfer it to the legs.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin in 10 minutes.
Fatigue-related injuries. It's extremely difficult to make a lightweight device that doesn't impede the user. So a lot of our focus is really making it lightweight, doesn't generate a lot of heat, and only assist the user when necessary. We found out really early on that if the worker is impeding anyway, they won't want to wear it. They will take it off within the first 5 minutes. Recently, we've been running clinical trials, so we're getting a lot more people coming in to try the devices. It's always extremely rewarding to see them being able to stand up and walk, and their comments, it's just, you know, like revitalized everyone here, boosted morale. You know, it's like just really good to see the response, and the type of work that we do can really impact people's lives.
A big part of what we're interested in is how learning can enable robots to act intelligently in very complex and unstructured environments. Robots are really good at essentially doing the same thing over and over again. This is basically how robotics has been for several decades. When it comes to robots going out into unstructured environments like your home or an office or a hospital, there all sorts of unpredictable things might happen. And I think that learning will be a crucial component for making that possible for robots, because then robots can actually learn from their experience, acquire a kind of common sense, and use that to act intelligently when things happen in the real world they didn't quite expect. So we might have a setting, for instance, where we've already collected a lot of data. Maybe the robot has picked up thousands of objects, or it's pushed around thousands of objects, and it can use that to get started. But in order for this technology to really be very powerful, to really enable intelligent behavior in any real-world environment, then we need the robot to be able to continuously improve from its own experience.
What we can see here is a visual model predictive control. The idea is that you have a robot interacting autonomously with the environment, collecting data by pushing around objects. And then you can train a video prediction model that can predict the future images based on an action sequence. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to select a point in the image and select a goal point where I want to have this object pushed. And now what is happening is that our algorithm samples a large number of action sequences, and then for every of those action sequences predicts where the pixel is ending up that I clicked on, as you can see on the right in the video. And yeah, now it applies the optimal action sequence to the robot and successfully pushes the object to the goal.
So that's, I think, where we really need to be headed, where the mode of supervision is such that the robot can acquire it autonomously without necessarily requiring human intervention for every single thing that it learns.
So the goal of this research was to have a robot be able to learn from videos of humans doing tasks. And the way that we had it do that was using what's called meta-learning, or learning to learn. So here's that demonstration. The demonstration looks good. Now let's give the apple to the robot. And we can shuffle around the objects. And then the robot now needs to try to figure out, just from the video of the human, the video that I gave it, how to accomplish the task. So we can see here that it's figured out that it needs to place into the blue bowl, and it's lowering the object into the bowl.
So that's a mode of demonstration, a way of specifying tasks for a robot that's much more intuitive, I think, for normal people to do, people who are not robotics experts. We'd like to be doing things that are actually making a difference in the world, that have commercial implications, but that also are helping make people's lives better. But in the long term, I think that looking at things that are actually relevant for real-world problems serves as a very good signpost to make sure that you're studying the right scientific question. Because if we want to create robotic systems that are capable, intelligent, that can reason about complex situations, we need to actually be pushing ourselves to get things into realistic settings. If we do everything kind of in video game worlds and in little simulator worlds, we might do a really great job of solving those simulator worlds, but not really make a big impact on real-world intelligence.
The Yield is an ag tech startup organisation that takes the guesswork out of growing for growers. They usually are taking weather information from stations that are 2,500 kilometres away from their actual climate. So we're looking at putting on-farm weather sensing that then gives them microclimate information so they can have more accurate information. But the other piece of it is that we're not just giving them the data, we're actually giving them information at the right time when they require it to make the decisions.
We collect everything a weather station could give us, which includes barometric pressure, wind speed, temperature, soil humidity, leaf wetness, and also soil radiation. So essentially this hardware which stays in the field collects all the information using 8 different sensors that we feed to our data models and run our predictions. We are the only company that has a product in the market that is an end-to-end solution that includes hardware and software platform. We use industry sensors from third-party companies. We don't build the sensors ourselves. We build the node that connects the sensor and the gateway hardware that aggregates the data from the field and sends them to the cloud. The decision between build versus use always has to do with what makes sense from an IP perspective and adds a USP to the company.
Our founder, Oz Harvey, has been amazing at raising awareness of what we're doing and then getting strong investment from people that are not just an investor that sit back silently, but are also partnering with us to deliver technology and solutions, which really helps when you're trying to be agile, but you're working with a large organisation like Bosch, who is our lead investor. Australia and New Zealand is the market space.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The
The
program
US
will
and the
begin in
UK,
5 minutes.
But we'll focus on selling within Australia and New Zealand and then expanding out globally probably within about 6 months.
So this glorious beast you see before you is the Trek Supercommuter Plus 7. It's a electric bike with pedal assist, but the pedal assist maxes out at about 20, so it can still stay within the range of an electric bicycle. And my favorite part is that it looks like a I don't know, some kind of urban assault bike. Let's take a closer look. I really like how this bike is put together, and I really like the replaceable battery. That's massively important for a bike like this. If you can't swap out the battery, especially if you're at work, it takes about an hour or two to really charge up. It's got these massive 2.4-inch tires, Shimano Dior shifters on the front. You also have a Shimano HG500 10-speed cassette on the back. So there's no throttle on this thing, so it actually assists you as you pedal. You can go from eco, which is a little bit slower, gives you a little bit of a boost, to touring, which gives you sort of a general overall boost, sport, which makes you go a little faster, and turbo, which makes you go really fast. It's a little expensive for what it is. You could probably have somebody push you around town for the same amount that you would pay for this thing, $3,700. But if you're into bike commuting and you have a long commute, this is way to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, please silence all mobile devices. The program is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage TechCrunch editor and Disrupt MC, Jordan Crook.
What's up, fam? Oh, that was just like one quick clap, but that's cool. That's probably what I deserve at this point. Thank you. Oh, number one right there. I'm gonna have to figure. What's your name? Matt. Original. Okay. Okay, cool. Well, that makes it better. All right. Okay, so we're just gonna jump right in. I think we're all aware that privacy and security are top of mind right now across the interwebs, and there's perhaps no one better to come and chat with that, or chat about that with us than former Facebook Chief Security Officer, and now he's going to be starting up a new program at Stanford. Please welcome to the stage Alex Stamos and your moderator, Taylor Hatmaker. Big round of applause.
Brand.
Everything is branded here. Absolutely everything.
Excellent.
Welcome to our brand. Welcome to the stage. As Jordan said, for anyone who might not know, Alex Stamos was at Yahoo as the Chief Information Security Officer. You spent a year there.
Yeah.
You left at Facebook, went in 2015. And then you spent 3 years at Facebook. And now you are moving on to bigger, different things. I don't know if they're better. I guess you don't know that yet.
I've been so bored, I wanted to get into the 2 a.m. phone calls of academia.
It's been a really dull year for you.
Yes.
So we'll get into that some. Obviously, we might have a hard time figuring out what to talk about. It's been very quiet over at Facebook, but
Yeah.
we'll try
Sports.
to. Yes, let's talk about sports.
College football season
that'll be
started.
fun.
Bears looking good.
Yeah, that sounds fine. We'll kick it off easy. Let's just dive right into talking about Russia.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's a light topic.
Right.
It's after lunch.
The country.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
It's a beautiful country. The
kind of wish I
architecture.
could actually visit it.
Well, I mean,
It's
now you
unfortunate.
can, right? Now
I have this map. You know how people have like maps on their RVs
Yeah.
of every state they've been to? I have the map of countries I can never visit for the rest of my life. And unfortunately, that's the biggest by land area.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But maybe things will change.
But not the only one. So
That's probably true.
Yeah.
So obviously yesterday, your former boss, Sheryl Sandberg, sat in front of the Senate Select Intel Committee testifying about Facebook and Russia and interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election and solutions moving forward. Famously, after the election, Mark Zuckerberg made the comments that the idea that Facebook had potentially impacted the election was a pretty crazy idea. So I would love if you could kind of take us through a day in the life, that you and your team realized that Russia had, in fact, potentially interfered on the platform.
So there wasn't one day, because we first spotted Russian activity in the spring before the election. So, our company and a bunch of other of the big ones have full-time threat intelligence teams. Our entire job is to track persistent government actors, groups that are always involved and doing things on the platform. And we already had a team that was watching the activity of what people call Fancy Bear or APT-28, who are the folks who are believed to work for the GRU, which is the main intelligence directorate of the Russian military. And so we saw some stuff from them in the spring before the election. In the end, their actual hacking activity happened off of Facebook. But kind of at the time, the way this worked is we have a relationship with law enforcement in the U.S. We inform them of the things we found. Later on, we heard about the DNC hacks and some other stuff, and so we tried to move quickly to shut down their ability to amplify that stuff on Facebook. But at that time, we didn't have a handle on the activity we found later. So there wasn't really one day, but after the election, we really dove into the overall fake news problem. And a big question was, what is behind this, right? Of all of the stuff people call fake news, what is driving it? And it turns out that the vast majority of it's actually financially motivated. So the stereotypical Macedonian teenagers who actually do exist and who are living the good life, as well as folks in Romania, Pakistan, a bunch of other places with kind of good English comprehension, technical skills, and low cost structure that they can run these large groups to do fake news farms. They're behind most of it. But then we started to find these chunks of stuff that was obviously not monetizable, and leading up to the announcement in September of 2017 of the biggest chunk, which came from the Internet Research Agency. So there wasn't one day. It was kind of this progression where we first saw a little bit during 2016. We saw the public stuff happen around the GRU, the creation of the DC Leaks personas, and then probably the big chunk for us was the IRA cluster that we found and all of the advertising that came with it in the summer.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. The chunks were kind of in a bucket, and you said they stood out because they weren't monetizable, which indicated that there was another motive.
Right. And that's actually, if you're looking yourself and you want to try to determine whether something is financially motivated fake news or it might be an information operation, one of the signs is whether they take you off the social network, right? The people who want to make money do so by doing arbitrage. They will push a lot of spam on Twitter or Facebook or any other network, take you to a website on which they run a bunch of ads. Some of those ads, those advertisers know they're there. Some of it's ad fraud. So they'll run, if you go to like a fake news site and all of a sudden your CPU fan spins up, it's because there might be like a 4K BMW ad running a hidden DOM element, right? They'll do a bunch of fraudulent stuff, but they're basically just trying to take the traffic. Whereas what the Internet Research Agency and the other government trolls want to do is they want to get you to reshare the content on social media. And so what they especially like to do is image memes, because people love to take an image meme, download it, reshare it something else, basically take credit for it. And that makes them no money. There's no way they can make money of you resharing this meme over and over again. And that's a good indication that somebody's paying them other than advertisers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I definitely, in my personal life anyway, have a hard time communicating to the kind of folks who wouldn't be at this conference, like how to look out for this kind of content. Obviously, it's an ongoing process where, Facebook is always going through this and finding new buckets of, suspicious activity or whatever. And they've been really transparent, in the last year to their credit around that. But it's hard to tell people how to know what to look out for.
Well, I think that one of the hard parts here too is there's a lot of smuggling of the messages they want to push through intermediaries, right? So if you look at the Russian campaign against 2016, there's really two different buckets. There's the GRU-led work, which is about hacking and leaking. They hacked a bunch of data from the DNC, from John Podesta, from Colin Powell, from other folks. And then they used that hacked information to create the news stories they wanted to see in the media. And then they amplified it using their trolls later. But in that case, it was the legitimate newspapers and cable news networks and legitimate journalists who were carrying the message of the GRU and kind of washing it through the respectability of their outlets that then changed the entire conversation, which is a very different kind of model than the IRA model, which is to directly push messages to Americans. Now, in the IRA model, it's much less about this candidate or not. The GRU was specifically targeted at Hillary, right? It is pretty clear the GRU's goal was to weaken a future Hillary presidency. I think it was less about actually electing Trump. I find it unlikely that the Russians are better than Nate Silver at predicting elections. It seems that they were assuming a Hillary presidency that they saw as a big threat to them. Putin has it's been well documented, like a personal antipathy towards her and believes that she was behind the protests against him in the 2012 Russian election. And so the GRU activity was specifically focused on weakening her, whereas the IRA activity, which started well before the election and has lasted well after the election, is really about driving wedges in American society. And so it's much more dispersed, but then that's kind of direct messages that you're getting straight through them, that they are pretending to be Americans or pretending to be legitimate outlets. And they do not seem as good at getting their messages carried by the media, but that's fine because they're going straight to people's eyeballs via Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere.
Do you think that we need to redefine cybersecurity right now? That's something you touched on in your Lawfare blog post, which everyone should read if you haven't. It's informative, and it's a well laid out argument for what needs to happen to secure elections moving forward, which we can talk about a little more later. But do you think we need to expand the definition of cybersecurity? I feel like that was must have been one of the most disorienting things early on, because you're like, you have to go to your team, obviously, or whoever at Facebook, the board, or your bosses, and say, we weren't hacked, but this thing happened. How do you describe that thing?
Right, and I think you're totally right about redefining security. I don't know if we'll end up using cybersecurity as the term. I spent years fighting against the word cyber, and now I know I'm old because I have a gray beard.
It was
and
a
I use
losing
the word
battle,
cyber. Yeah, I say cyber without irony now. I've personally grown up in this, in that I come from a very traditional information security background, right? Teenage hacker, CS, EE degree, started a security consultancy, was a security researcher, finding bugs, finding software flaws. And in my jobs first at Yahoo and then Facebook, I had to kind of grow into the realization that the vast majority of harm that is caused by technology does not have any kind of interesting technical component. It is the technically correct use of the products we build to cause harm. And that's not just in the disinformation space, that is in the abuse of children, in the harassment of individuals, in the suicide and suicidal idolation. These are kinds of things that have no technically interesting component to them, yet are incredibly harmful. And I do think we, as an industry, need to vastly expand how we deal with this, because that's not actually studying those issues, what we call trust and safety issues, or at Facebook the term is integrity that is used for that. But those kinds of safety issues, there's not really a field around it, right? You can't take classes in it at any good CS school. It's not something that you normally put on your LinkedIn resume. Like, how do you hire those kinds of folks? It's very hard to find them. And that's actually something, to give you the soft pitch for the pivot, something I'm trying to work on at Stanford, right? Is I think if we're going to graduate out these students who are going to try to change the world, they should have an understanding of all these ways technology has been misused in the past. And we need to start to build a cross-disciplinary academic center around looking at all the ways technology can be misused that doesn't fall within the really fine confines of traditional information security.
Can you also build a time machine so that we can go back and have that, like,
yeah, not so much
3 to 4 years ago? That would be great.
Yeah, and you're right. This is the tough part too. It's always been true that our technological achievements outpace the understanding of how it's going to be abused and the fixes. That's true in traditional security and in the trust and safety area. So I do wish that people, that we had an understanding of these things better. I do wish especially the big companies had a better understanding of these things years ago. Unfortunately, that's just not how we've trained people and not how these companies have grown up.
Switching gears a little, I want to talk about your choice to move from Yahoo to Facebook. I guess in the Twitterverse and the security community, you're widely regarded as a champion of privacy, a user privacy advocate. How did you reconcile concerns that users might have around data privacy on Facebook and Facebook's business, which is predicated on using data to target ads, in going in as a user privacy advocate?
Yeah. I think this is a tough balancing act anybody has to make, right? Like, if you want to actually make change, you have to be the man or the woman in the arena. Obviously, Teddy Roosevelt wasn't thinking in a very gender-neutral way, but you have to put yourself in a position that sometimes you're going to have a fight, and you're going to fight with folks who might disagree with you, and you have a chance of changing their minds. And there's I think the ad-supported internet is something that's going to last for us for a long time. We're not going to get away from the model of using data about people to target ads and therefore supporting these platforms. Partially because the truth is that a small number of consumers, mostly in North America and Western Europe, subsidize the existence of these technologies for everybody else in the world. And finding some kind of way to build products that require millions of servers and billions and billions of dollars on hardware, and lots of professionals to build and run it, finding a way to support that then that service can be available freely across the world, that's a super hard problem. So if these products are going to exist, you're always going to have these privacy trade-offs. And I personally thought it's better to be part of that argument and at these companies than to just throw, tomatoes from the outside. But, that's also can be a self-serving argument. Hopefully, when you're on the inside and you're trying to work on these issues, you have the ability to change people's minds. And it's not like I was working with people who were like, let's go violate everybody's privacy, right? Like, you're working with people who are well-meaning and want to do the right thing.
So they're not saying that at Facebook. Like, every board meeting isn't like, let's go violate everybody's privacy.
Right,
it doesn't go down
yeah.
like that.
And so it's not like you're deciding to go work with evil people. You're going into an organization that has a lot of different equities, and I think one of the things that's important is to go fight for the equities that you believe in, and then hopefully that gets balanced out with everything else.
By any measure, you've had an exceptional career. I mean, you've seen a lot of things go down just in the last 5 years or so.
Exceptional seems like one of those words that can be read in different ways.
It's a really technical word if you look at the definition. Still, at Yahoo and then again at Facebook, your name will be attached to at least 2 of the greatest cybersecurity scandals of all time, arguably. is that good or bad for your career or your resume? If you do you just skip over a few years on your resume? And you're like, oh yeah, I did a little thing before.
Yeah,
I started with a Y.
That's when you decide to take the CISO title, right? You decide that you're going to run the risk of having decisions made above you or issues created by tens of thousands of people making decisions, that those are going to be stapled to your resume before anybody else's. I mean, the truth is it's kind of a crappy job in 2018 to be a chief security officer. We're in this time, it's like being a CFO before accounting was invented, right? Like it's a profession that's only existed for a couple of decades, and we don't have the mechanisms necessary to really understand what happens at these companies and to understand the risk and control the risk.
Are you defining the job in a way, like as you're doing the job? Is it that kind of thing? They're like,
yeah, and I mean, there's a bunch of different kinds of CISO jobs, but at the big tech companies, it's again not just about the straight up information security. It is about privacy in a way that does not fall within normal security flaws. It's also about the misuse of the product. And yeah, all of these companies are kind of making up as they go along. And I think that's true for taking on the position. I mean, it's just, you take on the responsibility, you get the advantages of having the platform. The downside is when things happen that even if you don't have the ability to change or control them, that's something you have to take responsibility for. And I was the CSO when all this stuff happened. It is my responsibility. I'm not going to shirk it. I also hope that I was able to do things to make things better. And in the alternate universe where somebody else was at that job, maybe they did better, maybe not. But that if you're making individual decisions that you believe are ethical and moral and are pushing the ball the right direction, in the end, if things are imperfect, then you just have to kind of live with yourself and hope that you can continue to do good things. And partially one of the things I want to do is I've learned a lot of things from the failures that I've seen up close, and I want other people to learn about them, right? That's one of the reasons I left is there's a lot of things that have happened in the last 4 or 5 years that are really pretty universal, and the big companies that are on the forefront are dealing with them first, but there is not a company here at Disrupt, there's not a tech company starting up right now that is not going to have to worry about these trust and safety and privacy issues, and hopefully we could take some of those lessons and spread them out a little bit more.
Switching gears again, we don't have a ton of time left, but simple question. Midterms, are we screwed?
If there is no foreign interference in midterms, it's not because we did a great job, it's because our adversaries decided to give us a little forbearance, which is unfortunate. As a society, we just have not responded to the 2016 election in the way that would have been necessary to have a much more trustworthy midterms. The platforms have made changes. We have a lot of ad transparency. I think out of all the stuff that's happened, ad transparency is probably the most positive because, Russian interference or not, we do not want a future where campaigns and candidates and PACs are cutting up the electorate into smaller and smaller pieces. And so I think ad transparency is the first step there. One of the things I talk about in the Lawfare article is I think we need to have legal standards as to the minimum advertising segment size available to political advertisers, and that's something that has to be done legally across the entire industry. But I think there have been positive changes, but overall, the actual security of campaigns, not that much better. The actual security of the election infrastructure is no better. And my big fear is, the 2016 electoral map was this weird, carefully balanced thing. And I think in most cases, actually throwing an election one way or another is going to be very difficult for a foreign adversary. Throwing any election into chaos is totally doable right now. And that's where we have not moved forward. If we had attacks against the registration infrastructure that drops hundreds of thousands of people from the rolls in swing states, DDoS attacks day of, attacks against the intermediate tabulation systems, even if eventually we knew who won an election, if you do those attacks and you do a disinformation attack at the same time, you could make it that half the country always believes the election was thrown. And that kind of attack, I think, is very doable, and not just by the Russians, by a number of adversaries that aren't as sophisticated, but maybe the sophistication we're talking about is down here. So the number of countries that meet that bar is actually quite large.
So you're saying chaos is easy, but an assured outcome is hard. But it doesn't take an assured outcome to throw everything into chaos.
Right, and that's what, I think we need to have paper ballots, and that's great. But what paper ballots gets us is eventually 40 days from now, you know who won. for real. What that doesn't, if our adversaries turn every election into Bush v. Gore and open up the door just a crack, you're going to have the lawyers for the DNC and RNC put their crowbars in there and fight to the absolute bitter end. And so if they can just create a little bit of chaos, I think us as Americans are going to do the rest of the work for them. And after 2 or 3 elections like that, we will be in a pretty bad place. I think we take really for granted, 90% of Facebook's users are outside the United States. So I've spent a lot of time dealing with these issues in other countries. We really take for granted what a peaceful transition of power does for you as a country, right? That, we will really miss that if we're not able to defend it.
We're almost out of time, but I did want to ask, now that you are transitioning into your cushy gig at Stanford, that's how you describe it, right? Your cushy Stanford gig? I don't know. I don't know what your desk looks like. Maybe it's small. It's probably big.
I have an office for the first time in like 6 years, so that's pretty amazing.
Nice. Yeah, moving up in the world. Would you consider going back to work like as the CSO or CISO for a major internet company?
Not for quite a long time, no. I mean, there's a lot of decisions. Like I said, it's a very tough job. It's also just practically I have 3 little kids, and this is explicitly making a decision to actually be part of their lives. And by the time they're out, I'll be old and irrelevant, so it's unlikely anybody would offer me the job.
Well, they'll be hacking by then, so it'll be fine.
Right. My kids can take it over. Yeah, no, I mean, this is my plan for quite a while. And like I said, it's great to be a CISO and to work on that. I think we have these humongous issues across the entire industry, across the planet, that we need to work on. And the ability to tackle those is much more interesting to me right now than getting back into kind of the operational side.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all the time we have for today.
Great. Thanks, Taylor.
Okay, so when I say CFO of Goldman Sachs, you're not going to expect this guy. I actually am hoping that he will adopt me if he's on the market for 30-year-olds. I'm interested. So with that, I'm going to please join me in welcoming our next guest. He's the CFO of Goldman Sachs, Marty Chavez, and your moderator, Connie Loizos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
So I was just telling Marty backstage that I'm a big fan of Bill Maher. And last week he had this bit on his show where he was talking about merger craziness in this day and age, and he said something funny, but that also sort of resonated. He said, "We live in an age of get big or get eaten. In fact, I look forward to the brave new day when the only 2 companies are Apple's-on and Goldman Google Mart." But like I said, there are network effects. Goldman's everywhere. Is that the future where we're headed?
I think it's amusing to talk about that, of course, and I laughed as well. I do not see that as the future. I think there is, as you mentioned, a winner-take-all dynamic in certain kinds of technologies, what some call the siren server, where you attract the liquidity or you attract the nexus of activity, and you just become bigger and bigger. I think what also happens, though, is there's every 20 years or so a big paradigm shift, and very few people see it coming. And rather than just getting bigger and bigger and further concentrated, companies need to do something different in the next cycle than they did in the last if they're going to stay relevant. We're about to celebrate our 150th anniversary, and so we've been through a lot of these shifts and a lot of these booms and busts, and and we evolve as we go.
Yeah, it's amazing how relevant you've stayed, but I think a lot of that has to do with obviously your many different initiatives. One that's sort of particularly interesting, I think, to this audience is just how many investments you've made, including in the Bay Area. I think altogether, I don't know if this is completely accurate, but Crunchbase says that you have something like 640 startup stakes. Does that sound right to you?
It sounds like the right order of magnitude.
Can you talk a little bit about your strategy and also whether those stakes are sort of made available to all of your high net worth clients or?
So Goldman's a big company, about $1 trillion balance sheet, give or take. And we have many kinds of investing activities, and it's maybe difficult to distinguish them all, right? They just show up in public as Goldman Sachs.
Right.
But sometimes we're investing our own capital, our shareholders' money, directly on balance sheet in startups and seed stage companies. We have That one activity is called Principal Strategic Investments. It's about 80 companies right now, about $1 billion, generally small stakes, startups and companies that we see doing interesting things that are aligned with our businesses.
Who are the LPs in that group?
So in that group, all the capital, there's only Goldman Sachs. It's just Goldman Sachs directly on balance sheet. And it's constrained not just to be any investment that we think is interesting, but investments that are part of our ecosystem. So as an example, one of my favorites to talk about is a company called Kensho. Fantastic name. It's a Japanese word that refers to the penultimate stage before becoming the Buddha. You stick around to help other people become enlightened. And what they've done is applied machine learning to find signals in very large data sets. And so we discovered the company early. We became an investor. We became a client. We introduced them to our clients who became their clients. We introduced them to our competitors who became their clients. And roll forward, it had an exit just recently to S&P Global and was extremely successful in a very short period of time, which is really a perfect example of where we can apply capital but really be strategic, because we really will be a revenue-paying client and will bring this company into the ecosystem. And so it's no surprise that the IRR of that portfolio is 25%.
So Kensho sold for something like 600-ish million?
Plus, yes.
What's the criteria to invest? I realize you invest across stages.
Yes.
But what are some of the things that you're looking for, maybe especially, like you said, at the earlier stages?
So we like early stages because we like the valuation. We want to pay an appropriate price, though we invest and we support the companies through many stages of their evolution, and sometimes we do make relatively later stage investments. We generally like to lead. We don't have to. There's a lot of constraints because we're a regulated bank.
Right.
We generally look to have relatively small percentage stakes, order of 10%, in these companies, as opposed to something like 50%.
Okay.
And there the constraint is it needs to be part of our world. It needs to have something to do with finance, though finance is a huge and broad theme. So it could be market data or clearinghouses or machine learning applied to algorithmic trading. It could be all kinds of things. It's a very broad world. But if we see it as aligned with the rest of our businesses, then it's something that we'll likely be interested in. But it really has to be something where we're not just putting in capital. Lots of people have capital.
Right.
But we'll also become a client and we'll help the companies understand the use cases, and that's really the value.
Sure, there's always some strategic element to it. Another thing that obviously a newer area of interest is crypto.
Sure.
We have to talk about the news yesterday, which was
there some news yesterday?
Some market making news that your Bitcoin trading desk that you sort of talked about in May is somehow being pushed off into the future. What happened?
So I was in New York yesterday, and I was co-chairing our risk committee, and I saw the news article come over the Reuters monitor, and I turned to my co-chair and said, "Right, so I guess that tells you something." It wasn't like we announced anything or that anything had changed for us. I think one of the wonderful things about being at Goldman Sachs is we do get written about a lot, and I never thought I'd hear myself actually use this term, but I'd really have to describe that as fake news.
So there was not sort of first, what do you think the genesis of that fake news might have been, and what's exactly wrong with what they reported?
Yeah, so what I would say is that the world of financial services, as I mentioned, is very broad, and there's a lot of important distinctions inside it. So when we began talking about exploring digital assets, we knew since the beginning, and this has always been the case for us, that it was going to be an exploration that was evolving over time. And so, as you know, we've got a commodities business. We've been in the commodities markets for a long, long time. And Bitcoin, some think of it as a currency. It actually has a lot more properties, you could argue, as commodities. And in the commodities market, there's many ways of participating. Some people participate in actually trading, for instance, physical oil. Others participate in trading futures contracts, but they never take delivery or make delivery of the physical oil.
Okay.
And then there's over-the-counter cash-settled derivatives linked to the price of oil, where you also never make or take delivery of oil. The exact same thing is the case with Bitcoin. And so what we have been doing for some time, and really this is always driven by the clients, our institutional clients said, we would love for you to clear these new Bitcoin-linked futures contracts offered by the exchanges. So we've been doing that. And then clients
Since
said,
May.
Since May, we would like for you also to provide us liquidity and trade the principal, as principal, the futures contracts, not just clear them. And so we've been doing that. The next stage of the exploration is what we call non-deliverable forwards. These are derivatives, over-the-counter derivatives. They're settled in US dollars, and the reference price is the Bitcoin US dollar price established by a set of exchanges, the same one that's referenced in the futures contracts. And so we're working on that now because the clients want it. Physical Bitcoin, something tremendously interesting and tremendously challenging from the perspective of custody. We don't yet see an institutional grade custodian solution for Bitcoin. We're interested in having that exist, and it's a long road. And so I would just be speculating. Maybe someone who was thinking about our activities here got very excited that we would be making markets as principal and physical Bitcoin, and as they got into it, realized that that's part of the evolution, but it's not here yet. I don't know where that came from.
That's interesting. So you never necessarily set a timeline, is what you're saying?
Nope.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Can I ask if you own Bitcoin?
Yes. Yeah. So I do own Bitcoin. Some of you may know Wences Casares, who's the founder of Zappo. And years ago, I was visiting, and I met Wences. He's a fantastic guy. And this is many years ago. I think it might have been 2013, perhaps. I wouldn't know the exact date. And I said, yeah, I've been kind of thinking about actually having some Bitcoin, but it seems like complicated to actually get my hands on some Bitcoin. This is 2013. And he said, dude, I'll send you some. And so
good friend to have,
he sent me 5 Bitcoin, which I still have.
Good for you. We only have so much time, and I also wanted to talk to you, on the sort of theme of Goldman being everywhere and everything, about Marcus.
Yes.
This online sort of lending product that you introduced a couple of years ago.
Yes.
I think it's so interesting, and my understanding is that you're sort of gradually adding products onto this, like home improvement loans. You've got sort of a high-yield savings account.
All kinds of things.
What is Goldman doing? So the middle class is obviously becoming sort of a greater focus of interest, or?
The way I would think about it, Connie, is that this is a theme that many of you will know of, and I've always been interested in this one, which is what I would call disruption from below. And so, as an example, mainframe computer manufacturers used to say, our clients want mainframes, those mini computers are toys, they're not interested. Oops, that turned out not to have been the best idea, right? Then the mini computers came on, then microcomputers, then PCs, then PC manufacturers say, putting it on a phone, that couldn't possibly be serious, and now we've got billions of phones, right? And so I think if you are in your niche of wholesale with particular kinds of clients and you think that's all that's interesting, you could miss all kinds of things. And so for us, looking at the kinds of user experiences that consumers are getting and demanding is a really important way of understanding what our institutional clients are going to want. Because after all, it's just people at these institutional clients who are wanting the same kind of high-grade experience that they're used to on their smartphones. So when we launched this consumer business, first we call it Marcus, which is the first name of one of our founders, Marcus Goldman. And the tagline is a startup with 149 years of experience. And the idea was to look at a place where we can be a disruptor, where we can say, well, here's the downside. We haven't been providing these consumer banking services, so we don't have the data. On the other hand, we don't have the brittle legacy mainframes and the bricks and mortars branches, and so maybe that's a good thing. And sometimes there's regime changes, so if you get too stuck in your old data, it's not as useful as the new data.
Right.
And we looked at places where we have things that we're remarkably good at, in our view, and one of them is in managing risk. Another one is building software. I came from Silicon Valley. What attracted me to Goldman in '93 is we were building what now someone would call NoSQL, but we were doing that back in '93 as a condition precedent for managing our risk. So we saw an opportunity to build software, apply our expertise in risk management, be a disruptor ourselves, and solve some pain points in a large addressable market where we don't have to be large for it to be material to us. And consumer finance is classic. So being Goldman, we wrote up investment memoranda for 100+ different activities related to consumer finance, and we picked one as an insertion point, which is installment loans unsecured to creditworthy borrowers, principally for credit card consolidation.
Right.
But we always saw that as we're just getting started, and now we're exploring credit cards and savings accounts and all kinds of things.
Well, I have so many questions. You said creditworthy, and I have read that maybe it's like some subprime, but I don't want to dwell on that. Is that right? That's like a credit score of 640 is enough?
Yeah, you always want to be testing in the lower FICO scores to see things coming, right? And so there is naturally in everybody's portfolio a range of FICO scores, but the average score is high and the dispersion is quite low.
Okay. I think the bigger question, you're good at so many things, but one of these things is underwriting deals. So how do you explain to potential customers like SoFi or other online lending companies who may be wondering what you're doing? How do you sort of convince them that you're still their friend and not their foe?
So this is, of course, one of the exciting things about being in this industry. We have a lot of different activities. Sometimes we're an investor, and sometimes we're a financier, and sometimes we're an advisor, and sometimes we're a fiduciary, and sometimes our obligation is suitability and disclosure. I think it's something that we're all actually used to in the world of finance. So for instance, if we look at some of our biggest peer competitors on their asset management side, we're their biggest liquidity provider, and they're the biggest liquidity provider to our own asset management side. So it is just in the nature of finance that you do all of these activities.
Right. Speaking of competition,
yes.
Who do you sort of see as your biggest competitor? If that's not too broad a question. I mean,
no, it's a great question. I think increasingly, so much of what we do is based on automation, machine learning, engineering, and there's no question that if you just look at our asset allocation